In this Flashpoint, we take a look at Aklet's report on religious persecution in Bahrain, a clash in the Caucasus, Iranian and Venezuelan voting rights at the UN, American anti-missile defenses in Iraq, and a cyber attack in Ukraine. Now, the reason I picked Bahrain was because from the list of countries covered in the report, this is the one I know absolutely the least from by far, and also I believe this country is not often covered in the news. Judicial harassment targeting religious leaders is believed to be common during Ashura season in Bahrain. Aklet's report holds that religious celebrations can function as catalysts for religious repression, carrying a potential for state abuses and minority contestation. A focus on Ashura celebrations demonstrates how regimes and believers can choose to respond to this Shiite festival depending on their respective religious affiliations, and how these responses can raise the risk for certain forms of religious repression. In 2021, Aklet religion records a 50% increase in religious persecution in the week preceding Muharram, the 31st of July to the 6th of August, compared to the week prior, and a further 58% increase during the first week of Muharram, 7 to 13 August. Notably, most Ashura-related repression events are concentrated in only 3 countries: Iraq, Yemen, and Bahrain. These have in common the presence of a large Shiite population. In these 3 countries, Ashura-related repression accounts for 46% of all religious repression events during Ashura season, between the 9th of August and the 27th of September. Bahrain is the only Gulf country where Ashura is a national holiday and commemorations are allowed to take place publicly. Nonetheless, the politico-religious divide between the Sunni Muslim Al Khalifa royal family and the majority Shiite population, estimated to account for 60 to 70% of Bahrain's Muslim population, remains a major driver of religious repression. In Bahrain, Ashura celebrations are rooted at the community level and bear religious, social, and political meanings. In the lead up to Ashura, neighborhoods are adorned with black banners to display sorrow over Imam Hussein's death, and the matams, or Husseinias, Shiite congregation halls, organize public, chest-beating processions called mawqabs. However, what lies at the core of the dispute between Sunni regime and Shiite citizens is Ashura's political potential. In Bahrain's history, Ashura had been used as the launching pad for social uprisings in the 50s and 90s. In 2020, the Al Khalifa regime introduced severe limitations to Ashura-related celebrations under the pretext of curbing the spread of COVID-19. These restrictions triggered a crackdown targeting matams, as well as Shiite civilians and religious leaders. The prominent Shiite cleric Ayatollah Sheikh Isa Qasim interpreted the restrictions as targeting the Shiite community for, quote, political reasons. He condemned the regime's apparent double standards around the enforcement of COVID-19 restrictions, as other activities and facilities, such as pools and sport clubs, remained open. In 2021, Aklet religion captures 84 repression events targeting Ashura-related rituals in Bahrain, around 42 of which were recorded in the country between January and October of 2021. Ashura-related repressions spiked around the beginning of Muharram and trended sharply down after Ashura commemoration on the 18th of August. However, Ashura-related repression was also recorded in earlier months of 2021, indicative of continued repression of Shiite civilians and religious leaders due to their involvement in 2020 Ashura rituals. In August of 2021, Bahraini authorities validated a legal framework that introduced several religious practice restrictions aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19. In doing so, the framework had the effect of repressing Ashura practice and expression. Provisions within the framework limited the display of Ashura banners, limited attendance at houses of worship to 30 vaccinated adult individuals, and banned children from attending Ashura rituals. Akhled religion records these restrictions being enforced by means of, quote, judicial harassment, 35 events, and the removal of Ashura banners, 31 events. As in previous years, Ashura-related repression especially targeted religious leaders and prisoners. Bahraini authorities arrested and summoned preachers, religious singers called Radut, and Matams for taking part in Ashura commemorations. Shiite prisoners were denied the right to celebrate Ashura and punished if they performed rituals, including with discriminatory acts like being prevented from contacting their families. Akhled religion data show that these two categories, religious leaders and prisoners, account for approximately 1/4 of repression victims in Bahrain. On Tuesday, a clash reportedly broke out in the Caucasus, as 3 Armenian soldiers and 1 Azeri soldier were killed during fighting on the border of the two countries. Armenia says 3 of its soldiers have died in fighting along the border with Azerbaijan, raising fears the Caucasus neighbors may be edging towards another war. The Armenian Defense Ministry said on January 12th that the body of a 3rd soldier had been found in an area where heavy clashes were reported the day before that Yerevan and Baku blamed on each other amid warnings that tensions along the border are escalating. Now I'm recording this at the end of the week, and as far as I've seen, it appears that this particular event, it was limited to, these border clashes, and thank God no further escalation has taken place. Armenia's defense ministry has blamed Azerbaijani forces for sparking the violence by opening fire on January 11th in the border area near Verin Shorza in the eastern Gekarkunik province. It also accused Azerbaijani forces of firing artillery across the border and using drone aircrafts in the altercation. In turn, Azerbaijan's defense ministry reported that its soldier was killed along the border with Armenia, quote, as a result of an Armenian provocation in the direction of Azerbaijan's Kalbahar district, end quote. The Kalbahar district was one of several Armenia ceded to Azerbaijan as part of a ceasefire agreement that was brokered by Moscow. The death follows claims from Armenian-supported separatists in Nagorno-Karabakh earlier this week that Azerbaijani forces opened fire in a village in the region, damaging a car parked near a school. So-called defense officials in Nagorno-Karabakh said Russian peacekeepers deployed to the disputed mountainous region had been alerted to the firing, which Azerbaijan's defense ministry denied had taken place. On Wednesday, Iran and Venezuela were among a list of 11 countries that lost their voting rights at the UN due to outstanding payments. 8 UN member states, including Iran and Venezuela, have lost their voting rights because of unpaid dues, according to documents revealed on Wednesday. In an October 11 letter, Secretary General Antonio Guterres identified 11 countries as being at risk under the terms of the UN Charter, including Antigua and Barbados, Comoros, the Republic of Congo, Guinea, Iran, Papua New Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe, Sudan, Vanuatu, and Venezuela. The UN Charter stipulates that members that owe money that is equal to or in excess of dues in the 2 preceding years will lose voting rights. It does allow the General Assembly to permit such a member to vote if it is satisfied that the failure to pay is due to conditions beyond the control of the member. Such exceptions were made for the African nations of Comoros, Sao Tome, Principe, and Somalia through the end of the Assembly's current 76th session. Still, Iran faces a minimum payment of more than 18 million US dollars to have its voting rights restored, while Venezuela faces a whopping sum of nearly 40 million US dollars. Tumult-stricken Sudan, meanwhile, must make a minimum payment of nearly 300,000 US dollars. Their suspensions are said to have taken effect immediately. This is also the second year in a row that Iran has lost its voting rights for unpaid dues. Those rights were restored in July when Iran made the payment and strongly lashed out at ongoing US sanctions that have hobbled its economy. On Thursday, an American CRAM anti-rocket system was activated as it took down missiles fired by terrorists at the American embassy in Baghdad. 3 were reported injured in the attack after Tehran vowed revenge for Soleimani's killing. This is what we know so far. At least 4 rockets targeted the US embassy in Baghdad's heavily fortified Green Zone, the area home to diplomatic missions and the seat of Iraq's government, on Thursday. The embassy's CRAM defense system, supposed to detect and destroy incoming rockets, artillery, and mortar shells, was activated and heard by witnesses during the attack. Videos of the attack also show the defense system in action. These I will share below. 3 of the missiles struck within the perimeter of the American embassy. Reports vary whether 2 or 3 missiles hit the American embassy's perimeter. One is believed to have hit a school nearby, injuring a woman, a girl, and a young boy. Now, I would always like to end the week on a high note, but unfortunately, on Friday, I must say, quite scary news out of Ukraine. The news reached me as it was developing that Ukrainian government websites were hit by cyber attacks. Now, the first thing that popped in my mind was that this was bad and that this was most likely Russia. Now, I don't want to sound too alarmist, but I immediately thought that this may be the precursor to a military intervention. Talks between Russia and NATO appear at an impasse, with the Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs even warning of a potential war. The cyber attacks to me seemed as lights out, then go in. Now I have to admit I was not immediately aware of what exactly was happening and how severe the attacks were. After a moment, I was thinking of a slightly less extreme possibility, namely cyber attacks as a way of showing dissatisfaction with ongoing negotiations. Now I must say that everything I just said was all speculation. The BBC and CNN reported that the Ukrainian government has accused Russia of being behind Friday's cyber attack on dozens of official websites. About 70 government websites were temporarily down in the largest such attack on Ukraine in 4 years. Before the sites went offline, a message appeared warning Ukrainians to, quote, prepare for the worst, end quote. Access to most of the sites was restored within hours. The US and NATO condemned the attack and have offered support to Ukraine, while Russia has not commented on the hack. Oleg Nikolenko, Ukraine's foreign ministry spokesman, tweeted on Friday that the, quote, investigation is still ongoing, but the security services of Ukraine had obtained preliminary indicators suggesting that hacker groups associated with the Russian secret services may stand behind the massive cyber attack on government websites. Ukraine's intelligence service communicated through a statement that as many as 70 central and regional authority websites were targeted. Most of the affected state resources are said to have already been restored, according to Ukraine's security service, who said that personal data had not been breached. Additionally, I think this was less than a day ago. I'm recording this on Sunday. Microsoft says it observed destructive malware in systems belonging to several Ukraine government agencies. The victims of the malware include Ukrainian government agencies that provide critical executive branch or emergency response functions, Microsoft said. What is more, Ukraine had reportedly suspected a hacker group linked to Belarus intelligence carried out a cyber attack, and that it used malware similar to that used by a group tied to Russian intelligence, according to a senior Ukrainian security official, unnamed. This has been your Global Security Flashpoint. See you all next week.